everyone. Welcome to another episode of Your Way with No Way. My name is No Way, and joining me today is a very interesting person, ladies and gentlemen, Aashish Dhammani. How are you?
I am well, Noe. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Ashish, I'm really thankful that you were able to come on the show. I know you've probably been really busy, very smart man. Um, and today we're gonna be talking about something very interesting today, ladies and gentlemen. We're gonna be talking about yoga. And Ashish, you are a very experienced yoga enthusiast, correct?
Yes, we can say that. Yes.
So I guess let's start from the beginning. Ashish, do you remember what initially got you into yoga and like your very first session?
Absolutely. I just to preface this call, I am a self-taught yoga student, so anything I say here, people will might want to take it with a grain of salt. I am no expert that you want to take for everything that I say word for word. So just gonna put that out there. But the very first time I kind of got familiar with yoga goes way back to middle school. Not if people don't know already, I was actually born and raised in India and I just moved to the United States in 2016. So yoga came into my life in school because yoga is a part of curriculum for every middle schooler and high schooler in India. So you get like one specific morning once a week where you have to come together as a school. Every single student comes together and we take a yoga class. And that was the first time I was exposed to a yoga session. And that kind of got me interested. Not enough to pursue a career or get a certification at that point, but it was definitely a good starting point to spark my interest. And that kind of snowballed when my dad's sister, who used to live with us at the time in India,
Hmm.
she practices yoga very religiously every single morning. And when I say religiously, she's been practicing that for well over 40 years. Every
Wow.
single morning, she wakes up at 5, does her prayers, and then at the end of her prayers, she will start doing yoga for an hour, hour and a half. And that kind of really stuck with me for so long that I decided that, you know what, let's take this to the next step, start learning this better. Where do I go? Find some resources, ask people, ask how even I could get certified if I wanted to, and kind of go from there. So that was the beginning of yoga for a young 12-year-old Ashish, if you may.
12 years old. That's crazy because I think most people in the West would think that yoga is something you do much more. So it's like a gym thing, an activity that you do much older, but so young. And as you mentioned, it's part of the curriculum in India.
It sure is. And I think that's the misconception for a lot of people for yoga, that it is all about physical well-being. Although it's not. It kind of started as, back in the day when yoga originated, it started as a point for people to kind of meditate and help their mental health and bring awareness to their mental health, eventually adding postures and poses that we know today and bringing that in the physical aspect into yoga. And that's what the American world knows as yoga, the physical attributes of yoga that they're aware of. And it's a part of the curriculum because it started as PE, which is modern yoga for physical education in India, and then it integrated into our curriculum. And then we even launched very recently International Yoga Day. I want to say that was about 4 or 5 years ago, and now the whole world celebrates that with India.
it, it's it is a craze in the West when it comes to, like, people who want to be either I think most people would say they do yoga because they want to be in some type of to help physically, but and there's a small minority that do understand that the whole meditation side. um what other differences do you see when it comes to like the new adaptation from other cultures of yoga compared to India, where it originates?
For sure. I think if you date this back, the purest form of yoga, as per my education and learning, is
Mhm.
it all began about 5,000 years ago. And this is like back in second century. And the whole point of yoga, if I may, the word yoga itself translates to the word unite or yoke, which means bringing together your mental and physical awareness. So the whole point of the purest form of yoga when it originated was to help bring a collaborated awareness to both your mental health and your physical health. And when it came to the Western world, I want to date this back to around the late 1800s, where one of the biggest scholars of India, Swami Vivekananda, he brought the knowledge of yoga to the United States and the Western world, and it really caught on real fast. The classical form of yoga that people know here, and mind you, in today's world, yoga has adapted and formed into so many different ways of doing yoga. There's different forms of yoga called acro yoga, or there's aqua yoga, there's goat yoga, and dog puppy yoga. And people have really evolved and westernized it, and kind of, I'm not saying that they've taken away from the fact or the goals of yoga, but they've kind of accommodated it and utilized it to suit their current needs and their mindsets and their culture. So I guess in a way it has been culturally appropriated, but also at the same time it has taken into consideration everything that yoga kind of stood for back in the day and stands for now.
I think one of the most popular forms that I probably assume it's very extremist is the hot yoga that a lot of people
Oh,
mention.
if your viewers are watching me on YouTube, the sticker on my water bottle says any yoga I do is hot yoga. So I'm so glad you asked that question. I did not know about hot yoga until I moved to the United States. I did not know that it was a big craze, or it even originated because of a very famous man named Bikram, who hails from India but moved to the United States and started this whole movement called Bikram yoga. So Bikram yoga, basically, for the people listening to us, it's a form of hot yoga where a group of collective people come in and they do 26 fixed postures in a matter of hour and a half, depending on how long you take the class for. And the temperature of this room is anywhere above 100-degree Fahrenheit or above 95-degree Fahrenheit. It is hot. So if you were doing hot yoga, you know that you were going in for a very long session of extremely intense, if I may, series of movements, but also at the same time, you're going to sweat like crazy. And I picked up on that craze about 2 years ago when I joined a small studio here in San Antonio, Texas, where we're based, and they specialize in hot yoga. And it was something that I'd never realized I could get good at. I really enjoyed doing it because it not only was it an intense workout, but also at the same time, when you're sitting in that hot room, and I feel like a lot of people feel the same way, you're really kind of diving so deep into a lot of thoughts that you wouldn't in normal yoga. So you're with that sweat dripping down your face, your cheeks, and your body, you're every single drop you're realizing, oh my god, I'm coming with an intention, and when that drop falls off of my down my cheeks or down my body, I am losing everything, all the preconceived notions, preconceived ideas, all the fears and issues and all the problems that I came in with before the yoga, and I'm kind of getting rid of that. So it's very symbolic, and
Wow.
that's what really got me into it too. That symbolism really struck out to me, and also the fact that it was a guided 26 fixed postures, because I'm a man who loves instructions and having a guided path. I even align my clothes 1 inch apart on hangers in my
Wow.
closet. So I do like having structure and knowing that there's a specificity there involved in that practice. Not that it's not a part of other yoga forms, but with Bikram, that's what it gave me. It gave me a sense of structure. So, and that's what became a craze for the United States when Bikram launched his method of yoga, and then there was so many hot yoga studios that opened up. There's actually a very interesting documentary on Netflix if you
I was about to
if you want to
mention that.
watch. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
I guess as a quick point of basis, you said
Mhm.
26 to 27 poses at 100 degrees Fahrenheit. What is the typical session? Like a non-intense light session that like a normal person would probably try to do.
So if it
Obviously
was
not
not
at
hot
100
yoga,
degrees. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. I would say so. The original form of yoga is known as hatha yoga, where it just began as a series of postures. There's a lot of books and literature out there for people who are trying to learn yoga as beginners if it's not as intense as hot yoga. Also, YouTube the videos. You're going to find so many good people. I have a list of recommendations I can give you later on. But for people who are trying to get into yoga, you start small, start new, and see where it takes you, because you're not going to excel at anything the first day when you do it. You're going
Mhm.
to have to take it very slowly, very eventually. So if you're not doing those fixed 26 postures, that those 26 postures are actually a culmination of the basic postures that started with hatha yoga, and then through
Okay.
ashtanga, which is another form of yoga, and a bunch of other yin yoga, vinyasa yoga. So these are like very like technical terms that I can, and the jargon that I can use to like explain
Mhm.
to people. But in layman terms, it just basically is how and what are the postures that you need to make your yoga comfortable. By which I mean, if you have back issues, or if you have knee issues, or if you have some sort of shoulder ache, or any kind of body related, a specific part issue, you cater to those needs given the list of postures that you can kind of do. Um, Even with Bikram, when I started, they asked me a list of medical issues that I had, because they wanted to make sure that I wasn't specifically doing a certain number of postures that would maybe affect if I had back issues, or if I had any kind of a knee injury prior to doing hot yoga. So every form of yoga comes with its little constraints. It's about how you decide what is your intention for doing yoga. Is it meditation? If it's meditation, then you probably don't need as extensive or intense number of postures. If it's just beginning to kind of an issue of, or an ailment that you have on your body, and if you want to treat that, then you select a number of postures and go from there, and you build. That's why I got so involved in doing a personal practice and learning it on my own, and not starting out with a studio. I did eventually get my certification through a studio, but I started off on my own, and I think it's very doable. Anyone can do it.
Um, you were talking about Bikram a lot, and
Mhm.
I guess the term is yogi, right? Am I correct about that?
Yeah, yeah.
I know, and I've seen this a lot before. How yogis are so important when it comes to someone who wants to dive deeper. Finding, I guess, the right yogi. Can you explain more how that is?
Yeah, for sure. So the different kinds of yoga that I've mentioned throughout this talk so far, they've all kind of started from one person originating that style of yoga. And
Okay.
that's where most things get their name. So Bikram yoga was started by a man named Bikram. So it got its name from him. And then he developed his own style. Of course, he kind of went back and looked at all the postures and asanas. Asana is the actual word for postures in Sanskrit that we use. Um, and he looked at all the asanas possible, and then kind of combined them and put together a mixture and called it Bikram yoga. There's another form of yoga called Iyengar yoga, which is named after a very famous yogi who actually won a lot of international competitions. His last name's Iyengar. So
Mm.
after him, there was a yoga style named called Iyengar yoga. There's a Kundalini yoga, and it's also named after famous yogis in the day. So yogi is a very loose term for someone who performs yoga. So no way, if you started doing yoga tomorrow, you're a yogi. It doesn't
Oh,
necessarily mean owning a credential. What it just basically means is you're practicing the discipline. That's what yogi certainly means. It just means that you're practicing this discipline of yoga, and you are a disciple, and you're willing to learn and go from there. Of course, certification probably has some other names given to the people, but yogi, I guess, is a very loose term and misunderstood in many ways.
okay. Uh, I guess let's go back to the origins. Um, and can you talk to us about from a more historical part when it comes to yoga?
For sure. So, like I mentioned, yoga kind of dates back all the way back to the second century and originated in the Indian subcontinent. So, for a lot of people that don't know, yoga kind of started as a religious movement. Yoga kind of was a part of the Vedas, or the religious historic books from the Hindu culture of India. And these Vedas are first books from a civilization known as the Indus Valley civilization, or at least that's what historians have told us, that that's where it could be traced back to. And the very first written document on yoga was written by a man named Patanjali. So Patanjali is also actually a very famous yoga brand now, brand name that's become in
Oh,
India.
really?
But yeah, there's like products and different yoga related materials available through the Patanjali brand. But Patanjali is the name of the man who wrote the very first written scripture of yoga, and you can, in a loose way, say that he is considered the father of yoga, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, and he actually came up with this path to enlightenment. The ultimate goal of practicing yoga is to reach that enlightenment and inner peace, and it's through both meditation, like sitting down and meditating, and also doing physically challenging asanas or postures or exercises, as if you may. And he called it the eight-limbed approach. So eight-limbed approach. So there's like eight different steps that you have to take to attain this enlightenment. So if I may list it, the first one is abstinence. The Sanskrit word for it is yama. The second is observance. The Sanskrit word is niyama. The third is posture or asana, which I've been talking about this whole time. Fourth is breath control or pranayama, something that I do every single morning. I'm asthmatic, so it really helps me kind of modulate my breath control and helps me kind of get through the day continuously practicing it. So pranayama. Fifth is sense withdrawal, so basically giving away the materialistic possessions of life and really believing in the true inner self. The word is pratyahara. Sixth is concentration. The whole point of yoga to concentrate and believe in your true self and your intentions and your goals for that practice of yoga, known as dharana. And seventh is meditation, which is dhyan. Dhyan is a Hindi and Sanskrit word, roots from Sanskrit, meditation. And the last one is the superconscious state. So that's where you're trying to achieve contemplation, which is known as samadhi. So samadhi is the highest form of contemplation or superconscious state that one can achieve. So that's the enlightenment. And that's where Patanjali like really started this movement for people to kind of realize and take it seriously. Like, hey, we
Mhm.
as humans can achieve a transcendental state and can reach that seventh cloud, if I may, like
Yeah.
a Western reference. And to get there, you take this eight-limbed approach and make it to that highest point of enlightenment through yoga, which involves both meditation and a physically challenging routine of exercises.
Um, there's a lot, like, that's a bit of a lot to take, but when it comes to, I guess let's go by each point, like
Mhm.
abstinence. That's just like, I guess, drugs, sex. I don't know what.
I think that's a very good point. Yes, and like again, this goes dates back to the second century, so we can always kind of interpret to our times. What would this mean in 2020 for Noe, Ashish, and everybody else who's
Oh,
listening to do yoga? So definitely abstinence, the very first point that I mentioned, could mean how do I abstain from the materialistic pleasures of life? What do I need to give up in order to become a supreme being or achieve the transcendental state that we keep talking about through yoga? So yeah, those points that you mentioned could very well fit into that category and can be a part of what you consider to be important to be like abstained from, basically.
so after that, it would be um
Observance.
observance. So
Yeah.
is that observing like life in general, or is particular holidays, or what type of observance is that?
So I guess it's not in the literal sense of the word observation or observance. Observance is a very loose term here, by which we mean your actions. Keep track
Oh.
of what's going on. Keep stock of what you're doing and observe yourself. Yes, in a way, I guess it's observation. Now that I've said it, but I would I, but I would also say like keeping stock of what's going on and what your actions are and how they impact everyone around you. And ultimately impact you and your being. Because at the end of the day, this is like a soul purifying activity that we're indulging in, yoga as a whole. So that observance is very, very necessary. And if you haven't already noticed, these are actually going in like a very structured pattern. Like this
Yeah.
is quite proven. Like you're abstaining from things, you're keeping stock of things, and the third one is postures. So you're now aligning your body to kind of attain that streamlined approach. like, hey, do these set of postures and asanas to be able to kind of get your body ready to attain the enlightenment. Because achieving enlightenment is a multi-pronged process. You have to be mentally prepared, you have to be physically prepared, because your body and your mind soul connection that everybody talks about,
Yeah.
that is so famous in the Western world. So I feel like that combination kind of really plays in here, and through this eight-limbed approach is a very good example of how that can play into yoga. um, in present day time. After that is breath control. So crucial and so important. Like I already mentioned, I'm asthmatic. A lot of my yoga, or a lot of reasoning behind why I also got into yoga so seriously, was to help me get through my difficulty of breathing or my breathing issues. And a lot of people in India actually were doing that at the time, or at least a lot of my friends did. My mother did, my brother did as well. So we're an entire family like indulging in yoga and utilizing it to kind of help us in our health, at large. So breath control, also called pranayama, which is a specific practice in yoga that I do every single morning, and it's very accessible, very easy to learn for a lot of people as well. So if that's something that interests you on a smaller scale to just get started, I guess that's your way to go. Um, Fifth is sense withdrawal. So like I previously mentioned, just withdrawing from everything happening around, understanding that you have to kind of take yourself out of situations, out of context, out of issues, out of problems, and stand in this void, stand in this emptiness, because that's where you gain perspective. And that's the whole point of this sense withdrawal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then there is concentration. All of the things that I've mentioned previous, or prior to concentration, can all be attained because of concentration. So concentration is a very key part. So whenever we do postures in any form of yoga that you choose to do,
Mhm.
there's one thing that the teacher will tell you: look at one spot. If you're like in front of a mirror or if you're in front of a wall, just look at one spot and concentrate on it, because they want you to like understand the process and understand how important it is to kind of pinpoint to that one small little thing. And if you can like resist the temptation to look at anything else around you. So it's a very symbolic way of approaching things. Even when you're like closed, when your eyes are closed in like the last posture, what they want you to do is kind of focus all your energy, all your the word dhyan, the concentration, I guess,
Mhm.
they want you to focus all of that on one single thing, because at the end of the day, that's what you're trying to achieve: a singularity, oneness with yourself, that ultimate or superior being of soul. So all of that can be attained through concentration, and through these postures, you're practicing that. So, like I said, this staircase just goes up one at a time, with all these different approaches.
It's really cool how you actually do see that whole, let's first cleanse at the beginning. Then we go into the body, then we go into the mind, and then ultimately you do body, mind, and soul. And
Yeah.
um I guess another word that's also been thrown around is chakra. Or
I knew you would
the
talk about it.
people I know, okay. A lot of people who are very like, I guess, they think of chakra, they think of anime, they think of ninjas and stuff in Japan,
Right.
and then but there's this serious side to it, or this like a, I guess, more normal or like non so fictional side to this.
Right. It is. I'm so glad you asked. I have a funny story if I could share with that. Um,
Yeah, go ahead.
No way, you and I know each other from a business fraternity, during college.
Yeah.
And when we have a mentor mentee program called Big and Little. And when I picked up my mentee, or Little, very recently, 2 semesters ago, um, his gift to me when I picked him up was a paddle with the chakras on them, because that was the only reference he knew that was the closest to yoga, and he had learned about it from anime. So it's the funny. And now that you mentioned that that is the point of reference for people, it makes so much sense. I was like, wow, that's why if he's listening to this podcast, it's going to be so funny. He's probably going to text me. But, but
It
I'm
is
so glad you
true.
brought it. It is true. Yeah, for sure. but it was sweet. He made
Mhm.
such a good effort to kind of like align with what my interests were and kind of give me a present that was so personable. And it surely was. It was the best thing that I could have gotten. But going back to your questions, the chakras are basically just they're like these wheels of energy, if I may, throughout your body, and there's seven of them. There's seven main chakras, and the goal is to kind of achieve to open these chakras or wheels in your body and attain enlightenment and eventual enlightenment. So there, and if you can see, we can draw parallels between the eight limbed approach and the seven chakras here. They're all related. The whole idea is indulging in a practice that helps that mind, body, and soul combination that really opens up you to a future or a personal journey of enlightenment, if I may. So there's seven chakras, like I mentioned. I can list them for you. They're the root chakra, the sacral chakra, the solar plexus chakra, the heart chakra, the throat chakra, and the third eye chakra. And there's a crown chakra. So basically, the positioning of all these chakras starts all the way down to your buttocks and all the way up to your brain or even beyond. So they're all like aligned in one straight line, and you're trying to open them one at a time. In yoga, at least speaking from personal experience, we don't necessarily use the word chakra as when we're like practicing and doing our asanas. We just talk about open your heart wide or spread your chest wide to let the air in, the good energies in, the word like light in. So we don't necessarily refer or explicitly mention the word chakra, but
Okay.
overall we do. That's what we're referring to, I guess, in essence. So
So
for people who've heard that, I guess it will make so much more sense now.
people can now see that they won't get ninja powers from taking yoga classes.
Honestly, it might as well
Actually,
become that
maybe.
if that's not that
um,
I'm condoning you to go out and like just move your hands and try and do some sort of movement to please someone. If that's your thing, you do you. But I guess in essence, the idea is that we want people to feel enlightened and empowered and use those chakras to like feel like themselves, their true selves.
you mentioned a phrase right there that I know a lot. It picked people's ears. Third eye.
Mhm.
Always people
Ah,
talk. Yeah, people. I'm just, I want to for this podcast explain, like some of those general terms that people like to throw when it comes to podcast to yoga, and see actually, someone who's more knowledgeable actually explain what's going on. So
for
the
sure.
third eye, the famous third eye that people like to talk about.
Um, so this is my personal understanding of third eye.
Mhm,
I see it as the sixth sense. So we have five senses.
mhm.
Science says that, and we're trying to open and achieve this sixth sense. This sixth sense is the ultimate enlightenment that everyone's trying to achieve. The third eye and the crown are the last two steps in those chakras, if the ones that we're referring to so far. And the third eye, for my personal understanding, is this attainment of enlightenment. It's the ultimate that I'm trying to achieve. I'm trying to open this third eye that has been closed. If I may point on the video, it's usually here on your forehead
And
that
for
people
audio
think of when,
listeners, it's
yes,
right above
it's on your
the
forehead.
nose line between your eyes. I'm pretty sure a lot of people will be familiar.
For sure. And the whole goal is to open that third eye. And when that third eye opens, that's when you know you've achieved and attained some form of enlightenment, whatever that looks and seems like to you as a person. It's very individualistic. It's not at all collective. Everybody has a very different transcendental experience. And there are people in human history who've claimed that they've achieved some form of enlightenment and have opened the third eye and opened the
Wow.
doors to the next life or afterlife. Not that I personally believe in any of that. No
Mhm.
offense to people who do, but that's the goal. So at least you know you're striving to something. You're going towards something, and that's the whole purpose of third eye. You're that enlightenment that you're trying to attain or reach, and you want to open that third eye.
You were mentioning how this is a very personable thing when it comes to what you want to achieve with that enlightenment. And I guess enlightenment is very individualistic at what do I want to achieve. Do you, but I feel there probably is some type of data that shows out there what most people try to achieve, like what you know, everybody's individual, but in general, this is what most people try to achieve when it comes to finding enlightenment, or this is what they want to achieve out of yoga.
Yeah, for sure. I'm so glad you mentioned that because I think, like you said, having a personal goal from yoga is so important. And enlightenment can take any form. So, my most recent goal with yoga, so I have been diagnosed with anxiety and depression, clinical anxiety and depression. And my most recent goal was to help me kind of gain that self awareness and help relieve myself from that everyday anxiety and depression symptoms. And there's so many scientific studies done. I can actually quote one by the National Institute of Health. Um, they had they had put together a lot of different clinical studies, and they made a list of all the various goals that people have um, through yoga. What are they trying to achieve, and how are they trying to benefit from it? So someone like me with anxiety and depression, or someone with arthritis, I knew of so many people at my studio, the one that I did my hot yoga at, people ranging from the age of 45 to 60 coming in just to help relieve some sort of pain from arthritis. What a wonderful goal. Like you're coming in and trying to achieve that through your practice. Maybe back pain, gain some sort of balance, emotional health, so critical. Like understanding where am I at today, checking in with yourself and checking in with your peers or your family or your loved ones, and understanding how can I help and become more mindful. So there's so many clinical studies that have proven that people have been able to achieve their goals through yoga in all of these
That's so
aspects,
cool.
and it works miracles and wonders. There's so many people that have gained from doing or practicing yoga, I being one of them, for sure.
Mm, That's so cool because see a lot of people always, people assume that when you do yoga, you either, try to be a very physically fit person, or you're basically trying to become the next Buddha kind of deal. And um, so it's nice to
Sure.
see that the truth is that you could have a small goal, and yoga can be a way to achieve that goal you have. And that could be your enlightenment, if that's a correct way of interpreting all this.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, something that comes to mind when you mention that is people don't realize that the thoughts in our head may actually cause us a stressful time, but the moment you're in may not really be all that stressful. And that's the point of yoga. Like, be in that moment, be present, know your goals, try to achieve them. And that's where you're aiming at. Forget about the world. Forget about the world for a second. Just think of the two issues that Noe has. Go into that room, do your practice to the best of your abilities, and just let it go.
That's that's a very pure form of like thinking about it, because I think this is helping break some pre-assumptions that people had about what it.
For sure.
There's a very humane side to yoga, aside from this very spiritual, nice feeling that it has too. And I guess I do have to ask, um,
Mhm.
there is a dark side to this when it comes to, and not dark side, but the commercialization of yoga that you probably see sometimes, and you're kind of like, well, that's not really the point, or at least these weird assumptions when it comes to it. Is there anything that sticks out to you that you might want to address at this point?
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, yoga originated in the Indian subcontinent and it was brought over to the Western world, and it sort of took a new form and shape to kind of fit the needs of the people. Not that I'm saying that it was stolen. Of course it wasn't. It was shared.
Mhm.
It's knowledge that was imparted.
Yeah.
But like you mentioned, it's been commercialized. I'm not a yoga teacher. I do help a lot of people learn yoga and share my knowledge with them from whatever I have learned. I haven't renewed my certificate, which I'm trying to do again. I'm trying to become what they call the RYT, a registered yoga teacher. You have to invest 200 hours and get that certification. But people
Okay.
have commercialized this form of exercise, but that's true of anything in the world. You take one form of art, one form of doing an activity, and you kind of try to sell it and like glamorize it and package it so well that everybody's attracted to it and wants to do it. And that's what yoga has become. But also at the same time, we have to give the due credit to people who are trying to maintain the sanctity of it and stick to the original goals of it. There's so many new studios everywhere. There's so many new forms of yoga. Yesterday, I was reading about people bringing in pigs and doing yoga with them. I'm like, wow, so you've just made a developed version of yoga with goats or yoga with puppies, which I've been a part of. Not gonna lie, very fun, very cute, very cute. But again, not a lot of yoga going on, just a lot of mingling with animals going on there. So it's not untrue that there's commercialized version of yoga. Like I said, so many new studios and places coming up, and so many personal trainers teaching yoga and getting certified. Nothing wrong with that, of course. 100% you're still indulging in the activity, but try. This is what I told myself when I was personally learning about it all on my own. Try to stick to what the purpose of the thing was, not only the purpose of what yoga does to a human being, but what is Ashish's purpose with yoga? What does Ashish want to achieve? And that's where I kind of take myself and remove myself from commercialization of yoga. That's where I like make it personable. That's something that you mentioned previously in the podcast. Make it personable, make it your own, and that's how you get away from commercialized yoga. Not that saying that going to studios is wrong.
Yeah.
100%. If you want someone to instruct you through things, like I like having a gym instructor because I could not tell my way from one set of equipment to the other. I am just not very well versed in the lingo or the jargon of the gym world. But
Yeah.
the same way, if you're not familiar with yoga, it's a good starting point for sure. It's a very good starting point. Just learn from someone who's already been there in your position. But it's not unknown, is what I'm trying to say. Commercialization is not unknown and it's not untrue. It's very much a part of the society, very much ingrained in our fabric, and we're still here. There's people trying to practice the best way possible and still keep the goals true to why yoga was even invented in the first place.
You were talking how it was brought to the West. Um, I've seen, a couple of, everybody indulges goes down the rabbit hole in Netflix. Some stories. I guess was the 70s and 60s very popular in America. I guess it was a time where hippies were around, all this love, and I guess yoga just fit right into that culture that America was at that time of finding more meaning to oneself. And I guess some instructors were able to find and really fill that void for a lot of Americans at that time period. And I've seen some documents, I'm pretty sure some of our listeners have also, where they talk about these larger than life personalities that came to America and put a foothold of yoga here. Are you familiar with some? I know Bikram, of course, was one that you mentioned, but any others?
Um, I don't know of anyone else who came down to the West and stayed at the level of Bikram or influenced at the level of Bikram, but we do have one in India of our own who's
Oh, really?
become sort of who's sort of become a phenomenon, and why my family is so involved in yoga as well back home. His name is Baba Ramdev.
Hmm.
I think he is the founder of the brand that I told you about, Patanjali. I
Oh,
wouldn't be
okay.
too sure. Don't quote me on that. But I feel like he definitely became a very very sincere and big phenomenon in India surrounding yoga. He sold the brand of yoga to the people of India, and I want to say a lot of neighboring countries as well. He's a very famous name in southern Asia. Um, but those Netflix documentaries aren't wrong. Like you said, when the hippie culture came around and people felt that void and emptiness in their life and they needed something to fill it, yoga sort of became that tool, that vehicle to mobilize people and mobilize their lives and change their lifestyle basically. And Bikram took advantage of that. And that's what the documentary talks about. If you haven't watched it on Netflix yet, definitely go watch it. It talks about how people came in and brought their education with them. Again, I don't speak as someone
Mhm.
who's trying to question westernization of something. I am not. I'm all for it. Share the knowledge, share the love. 100% all on board with that. But when you watch documentaries like that, you realize, oh my God, there's people who've done so much and really taken it to the next level and entered a new whole market, I guess, in a way, and commercialized yoga. So I guess you could even call that the first big commercialization of yoga, because I think Hollywood was the first place that caught on to the craze of yoga. And
Yeah.
anytime you have someone who is a public figure and indulging in a new activity that sort of becomes the craze and influences the masses so widely. We didn't have the social media back then, but it still took on the craze so fast. But now that we have social media, imagine if someone like Bikram comes today and becomes a phenomenon. Some TikToker posts about them on their TikTok, it's going to go viral
It's
in
gonna
a
go
matter of
viral.
hours. Yeah. So it really speaks to how, like, what a long way we've come in bringing our knowledge to other people and other societies. And that's what yoga really did back in the 60s and 70s. And these documentaries talk about them and how people embraced that into their lifestyle and made it their own new lifestyle.
I guess can you once again reiterate how long you lived in India before you moved to the States?
For sure. I actually moved here when I was 19. So I lived in India from the age of 0 to 19. I
Okay.
spent 19 years of my life there. Yeah.
What has do you now gauge the sentiment that people in India have about other countries' versions of yoga? Like I know you don't obviously don't speak for the entire subcontinent of India, but in general, that you sense this sentiment across the country.
For sure. In the masses, the knowledge of yoga is what we're taught in school because, like I said, it's a part of the curriculum and that's what we're taught. And that's what I learned too and began learning from that point on. But for us, the Western view of yoga doesn't necessarily like really bother us or become a part of our lifestyle. I don't think a lot of people have an opinion on how the Western world, well, the majority does not have an opinion on how the Western world has changed or commercialized or culturally appropriated the purest form of yoga. We are aware. We also have our own hot yoga studios in India. We have active yoga studios in India. We also have puppy yoga sessions in India. My mom tells me about it sometimes. Really funny. But so I guess in a way we've embraced that change ourselves. So it was never a tussle or a fight or a war over who's the purest. It was always about how do we improve the art of yoga? How do we bring it to people and kind of shape it and change it to their needs and wants? And that's what we've achieved. So I wouldn't necessarily say that there's an issue anywhere with or for anyone with the way yoga has been adapted to the Western culture. We still my most recent experience or knowledge of what's happening in India and how they perceive it comes from a friend of mine actually. She visited India to get her yoga certification a year and a half ago. She spent an entire month and a half in India getting trained in like a small ashram. Ashram is a school where
Okay.
she got trained by like PhDs in yoga, and she just had the best time and told me that these PhDs know what's going on in the Western world, yet they want to help impart the purest form of knowledge and help gain and gauge of Western interest. So, mind you, this program that she attended had a great number of people visiting from all around the world, not just the United States, but all around the world. And they're spending a month and a half just learning the skill and the purest way of approaching an art that dates 5,000, 2,000 years ago. So, um, going
That
back to the point, the question you
yeah.
were asking, no quarrel there. I think we've made our peace with the form, and we still continue to practice the yoga that we were taught and make our peace with it and enjoy it the best we can.
That's honestly, I kind of expected that because if you're the country that, learns and teaches since you're a child these ideals of, you know, just clearing your mind for like just forgetting, clearing yourself from the world, then stuff like this won't bother y'all. You get me? So it's it actually translates into that reciprocation to this, like, oh, you know, we're just over here doing, and that's what I guess what yoga teaches you to when you were talking about the points where you just cleanse yourself and uh just take yourself away from the world. um
I love that.
that's
I hadn't thought about it in that way, but you
and
make a
it's such
very good point. Yeah.
s- such a pure form of I to think about what's going on, because a lot of other cultures would immediately demonize westernization, but it's such a it's so refreshing to hear that kind of idea. Like, oh, dude, we're just doing our thing over here. Like, I guess another thing that probably people would think. about, and I think you would be good to also clarify um, the relationship between Buddhism and yoga. I know a lot of people intertwine them in general. Just general public would put two and two together in the same room. I was wondering if you could just speak to that.
Yeah, for sure. So Buddhism is a religion, or a community following the principles of Gautam Buddha, the founder. I don't personally practice it. Like I said, I'm no authority on any of this information. Do corroborate this on your own. But a major practice or part of the Buddhist living or practicing the religion is meditation. Meditation and achieving that enlightenment. That's the whole point of religion for them, is attaining that enlightenment, eventual enlightenment. And yoga sort of became a part of their lifestyle. It's not a part of the religion. It's yoga may have originated from religious roots, but it no more is like a requirement or mandatory requirement of a religion for that matter. So for people who are questioning this relationship between the religion and yoga itself, it exists. But what the whole point is, we're taking one root of yoga, which is meditation, one part of yoga, which is meditation, and kind of plugging it into the equation of how Buddhists are trying to achieve and attain enlightenment. I'm not sure if all Buddhists practice yoga. I'm not quite sure actually.
I think it's just one of those
It
things
really, yeah,
that people just put a statue every time when they talk of yoga. They like, I guess it's
right.
just one of those Hollywood things where they just put a yoga put a Buddha
Buddha.
statue in a inside a yoga studio. But
Yeah,
I guess that's a great explanation to clarify that. And you talk about
for
meditation,
sure.
and we've been talking about this for like 30 minutes now, and let's get to that point, which I believe is probably one of the most important points I'd say from what you've been mentioning. I guess
Yeah,
it's gonna
for
be
sure.
it. I might be impossible for you to describe, but what goes on in the mind, like when you talk about meditation?
Trust me, if I had a penny every time someone asked me that question, I did not have an answer, I would be a millionaire by now. I, I, and that's what I am trying to get to as well. Meditation is such a critical part of the practice of yoga and such a critical part of what I am trying to achieve through yoga as well. Find a center of peace, a center of void where there's nothing else but just me and no thoughts. And that's the emptiness that I'm trying to get to. And for a lot of people, that's the goal of meditation. So meditation is basically the practice where you take the most comfortable posture. It's a misnomer for a lot of people, or misconception, where people think that you just have to sit on your buttocks and you're just like with your leg or feet just like closed
you know
in
that
like a nice straight posture.
yeah.
It is advised you do that. It is advised you do that. But at the end of the day, it is whatever's comfortable for you. A lot of people I know meditate sleeping, which is totally okay on a yoga mat or an exercise mat.
Interesting.
If that's what pleases you, you do you. There's nothing wrong with it.
That's really cool.
So yeah, and there's no prescribed time of the day where you do your meditation. It's so funny because we already touched upon the topic of religion, and I can go back to that if I may.
Mhm.
A very significant part of the religious community that I come from, we also have a meditative component to our prayers every single morning. So every single morning from 4 to 5. Oh, I practice Islam, by the way,
Yeah,
for
for
viewers,
our
and
lenses
if
and
they're yeah, and a significant part of the community that I come from in Islam is the part of meditation. We call them bandagi, is the
mhm.
actual word. And the whole point of it is you sit, you take a certain posture, you sit there for an hour every morning, or at least try to. And and for a lot of people that are chants and stuff, I don't personally use a chant, so I just sit there and try to empty my mind. So the way I have been doing it for someone who might want to try is take it 1 minute a day at a time. Try to stop your brain from having any thoughts for 1 minute in the morning. So hard, trust me. I have been doing it for so long, and I still have not made it to 5 minutes. I just can't. It
Wow.
is so difficult because I'm someone who just is, I'm so distracted by a lot of things all the time. There's so much going on in life. There's so much pressure on the outside world. There's so many external factors that are bothering me on the daily. And that's
Mm.
kind of preventing me from like spending just 5 minutes with any single thought in my head. And that's my personal goal with meditation. So meditation is, again, with the rest of yoga, is what you make of it. But the goal for a lot of people through meditation is achieving that void, that emptiness, so you're not thinking of anything else and have this moment of salvation, a very fleeting moment of salvation just for yourself, where you have nothing else going on and you're just calm and quiet and peaceful. I guess peace is a very good way and word to associate with meditation here.
I can see how that would be so impossible because I'm one of those. As soon as I wake up, I'm thinking about what I'm doing at work and what I have to do at work. And I think a lot of people have that. Like they wake up and immediately, I have to go to work. Like that's the immediate outside pressure that you wake up and you're asking us for a whole 60 seconds, which a lot of people think it's easy, but I already think like, oh man, as soon as I wake up, I'm like, oh, I have to do this at work. I have to do this today. I have to get this done. Oh man, I and achieving that peace, and I guess that is that inner peace what you're talking about, or is that
It,
something different?
oh, great question. I guess it's so personal again. For me, I guess the idea of peace is very contradicting. There's times when I think peace is just this calm and quiet and of nothingness, and it's on the inside. But there's times where peace just means having a moment to myself where I am complete, I am full, and I am whole. I know it sounds so vague when I say it right now, but in the most loose and easiest sense of the word, or the most literal sense of the word, is just understanding that peace is what you make of it. What is peaceful to you? For some people, is just satisfaction. For some people, is just it's some sort of achievement that they were trying, or it's some sort of task they were trying to achieve, and when they achieve it, that's peace for them. So in meditation, you can realize that it could range anywhere from inner peace to an outer external peace, for that matter. So it runs the whole gamut. There's a spectrum for the word peace itself.
Wow. And okay, so you get that peace. How have you seen that projects exterior, like how that affects your daily life? That you've seen some improvement. Obviously, you talked about your breathing, but anything else where you like? I used to be like this, and now I've been able to achieve this.
For sure. I have been, and I still am, very much a very, very impatient person. um, and it really is hard to like control and curb, for in everyday life, and I'm working towards it, and that's why meditation is such an important part, of my life, and the breathing control and all of that. One way that I've seen that it's impacted me, I have become a little less impatient with a lot of things and a lot of people in general in my life. I am very quick to like say things back, or very quick to kind of respond to certain things, or just flip out or snap at things, not necessarily people but things in general. And I think I've kind of calmed down a little bit, because of the practice that I do. I just go immediately in my breathing exercise when, so in movies how people are just like start counting back from 10 if you're like really frustrated and if you're going to snap at somebody, and that really
Yeah.
helps. I think I've tried to like involve that in my life as well. Just start thinking something else, just start breathing, doing those exercises, just calm yourself down. And meditation really has helped me. And I actually I would like to point out something, that meditation doesn't necessarily have to mean like actually sitting down in like in a posture and like concentrating. There's various forms of meditation. It's a very symbolic word. It's a very loose term word. A lot of people find journaling to be meditative. I do
Okay.
that, and it's really fun, like just jotting down your thoughts of what's happening, what is happening around you, how do you feel your emotions and your feelings, because a very crucial part of meditation is reflecting within yourself, reflecting on what your feelings are, what your emotions are, how do you feel about certain people or certain things or certain actions and things like that. So meditation can take so many different forms, so let's not like label it to one particular thing. Maybe in yoga practice, like the authentic yoga practice, it might mean one thing, but in the broader sense of the word, it's just is there's so many ways to achieve that. So if you're trying to find a practice of meditation, journaling might be a very meditative way to get there.
That's this is such an interesting topic, and I'm so glad I have you
Yeah.
on. um, and I guess at this, I know the topic was yoga, but I feel like this is kind of tapping into psychology as well when it comes to like
Absolutely.
helping people. Like there's a psychological aspect to yoga or a
For
benefit.
sure. Yeah, like if I may here, when I practice yoga, I actually listen to a lot of podcasts on my AirPods while I'm doing yoga.
Really?
And there's this one, yeah, and there's this one particular podcast. I follow this psychologist who's also a social worker and a storyteller, as she calls herself. Her name is Brene Brown. And she has the most insightful podcast about just human psychology and human nature in everyday living. And it just helps me kind of collect my goals and ambitions of that particular yoga practice together. So every time I listen to her while I'm doing yoga, or even when I'm journaling, I listen to
Mhm.
her podcast and it just helps me bring together. Oh, she's talking about being reflective. She's talking about feeling my feelings, or she's talking about being emotional and open and vulnerable. And that's all the things that yoga is. That's all the things that meditation is: being vulnerable, being open to feeling your feelings. And you're so right when you point out that this is so much more than just like physical exercising. It's so much more. There's so much human psychology involved. There's so much keeping in touch and taking stock of your own self and self-awareness involved here. So perceptive. It just transcends so many boundaries. And I'm glad that we're talking about that, because I think yoga for a lot of people is just limited to that physical exercising, but there's so much more than that. You're touching so many different things and you're touching your own life in so many different ways.
It's funny how you said, and it goes back to that whole personalization thing where you mentioned uh, yoga doesn't necessarily have to be a silent exercise that you do. Like you listen to podcasts while you do that. People have puppies. People people are at 100-degree temperatures. It's so um you can adjust it to what you want, and that will be a new form or style. And I believe a lot of people right now might say the same thing. Like, oh, I listen to podcasts when I do yoga and stuff. I'm just mind
Oh, for
blown
sure.
because I probably, like a lot of people, had that misconception. It's a silent room that you just sit down. You know, you do the poses. You have maybe like a light, violin or a light Japanese flute in the background, and that's it. But there's this whole different world out there when it comes to yoga.
It's so funny because there is a form of yoga that we did at the studio that I used to go to last year here in San Antonio. And we do yoga Pilates, we do yoga with pop music. It's so fun. It's just adapting your postures to the music. And there was like a weird dance element to the thing. I can't remember the exact name of the session that we had, but it's just so fascinating. Like you said, there's just so many different variations to this one thing that originated in the middle of nowhere back in the day, but today has just become a part of everybody's life and is just so customizable and so personable, and you can make anything you want out of it.
And I guess that also helps to attract newcomers to yoga, where it comes like, well, I'm a really dog person. Oh, we have puppy
Oh yeah.
yoga, and like, oh, I really like some type of, I like podcasts. Well, you could actually do podcasts while you could do yoga while you listen to your podcast. Um, the music doesn't necessarily have to be this peaceful thing, as you mentioned. It could be something out there, because one thing that pops into my mind is a lot of athletes in very rough sports, football players, basketball players, they practice yoga in order, I know, probably more for physical stuff, but probably also for the concentration aspect when it comes to, those intense moments that they go through. I'm pretty sure that helps into yoga. And I know for sure, I've seen it, that it's part of their like training. They dedicate at some point some time into yoga to
Oh yeah,
help.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So if if you use the Nike app on your iPhone or whatever phone you use, Ronaldo, a really famous soccer player, actually a very famous international soccer player, has his own yoga routine video recorded for the app. And a lot of people follow that. And it's so fun.
Wow.
And yeah, like you wouldn't realize that people like him would utilize yoga. Like, hey, what does yoga have anything to do with soccer?
Hmm.
But that's the misconception. Like it's just it transcends so many disciplines. Like you literally can have anyone do yoga for whatever reason they choose to do it, and Ronaldo being one of them. And that video was really fascinating. I actually practiced it quite a few times myself.
Of course, I know, and this is probably also Hollywood, but I know it's true as well. A lot of sects like to practice yoga because
Oh
obviously
yeah.
it's C-level people, C-suite level people, they're practicing because they need to. I guess you were talking about how it's about finding that peace, but also is that also the same as de-stressing? Would you say it's the same thing, or it's a different concept from each other?
I guess de-stressing could mean peace in a way. They I
Okay.
wouldn't say they're interchangeably synonymous, but
Oh,
I would say they're very interrelated for sure. Um, like I said, you it's peace is the word is what you make of it. It's like you for Noe it could mean satisfaction, for someone else it could mean happiness, for me it could mean achievement, for some people it could mean de-stressing. So that's your peace. You're de-stressing from the rest of the day, and that's the peace that you're trying to achieve. So in a way, you could say they are related.
and but yeah, you and me are in the business world, um, and like I would say, C-suite people they're practicing yoga, and I know Brene okay. Does Brene Brown do yoga? Would you say you know that she does?
I I can't really speak for her, so I don't know if
Uh-huh.
she does. I don't
I wonder if she does.
recall her. I wouldn't be surprised if she
I
does.
wouldn't
She
be
does sound like
surprised.
the kind of person who would. Me maybe if she's listening to this podcast, I would love for her to respond on her own podcast and tell us if she does yoga. It'd be really
If
cool.
Brene Brown listens to this podcast, I will shave my head. Like this is like she
I
that
would
would
cry.
be
Trust me.
that would be
Oh,
insane if
I'm
she
a
ever
total
listened.
fangirl. I have written her letters, love letters, emails, everything. I've done the whole stretch. So
I
that would really
recently
be.
I, I work in marketing for those who don't know, and recently was part of the electronic Adobe conference. So Adobe products, Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign. I use that every on the daily, and Brene Brown was actually the keynote speaker
Oh,
um,
lucky.
for that conference. So I was able to attend. Thankfully, my company paid for the team to be able to attend the virtual conference, and we were all like, I know her loosely. Before that, I knew who she was. I was like, oh, she just I just knew she's a person that knows what she's talking about. So I want to listen to her, and I
Absolutely.
listened to it. She was amazing, dude. She's an amazing woman that just every point out. I was my mind was blown every like 5 minutes in that 1 hour keynote. It was crazy.
I know. I really want her to be my mom. It's that weird. I have I like listen to her podcast so diligently and so religiously. Like every week I'm ready on a Wednesday morning, just listening to her podcast and making sure that I'm taking notes and like realizing what I'm doing. I don't know if you see the wall behind me. All of
Mhm.
those are Brene Brown's definitions of some very important words.
For our audio listeners, there is 9 um, plaques, I'd say, like plaque or framed
Yeah.
certificates above his bed, like above his headrest. So they literally fall down, and the knowledge falls into his head every night. Um,
Yeah, there's
I
literally
think what
words like wholehearted living, true belonging, vulnerability, love, connection, failure. Just wonderful, wonderful definitions by Brene
I guess we went a little bit of a tangent there. So
Brown.
she's just that awesome. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
For everyone out there, after you listen to my podcast, go listen to her. Probably be the other
yeah.
way around. And we're being serious. Um, she's what are we're almost hitting an hour. what would be something you would like to mention to people who have not stepped into the world of yoga, but are, after listening to this, might want to, if you could go back in time and tell Ashish before he went into yoga, know this, um, focus on this, disregard that, what would that be?
For sure. For people who are, if they're questioning whether or not yoga is for them, the few things that I would like to tell you is, can you decide for yourself if you want a good blend of both self-awareness and of physical well-being at the same time? Then yoga is for you. And this is what I would tell Ashish before he started yoga as well. If you're trying to strike that balance of being physically fit but also mentally fit, yoga is for you. And it's just so easy. It doesn't have to necessarily have to start at a studio, especially during this pandemic. You
Hmm.
can stay at home and watch so many good YouTube videos and so many different wonderful books available online. I have a lot of literature that I use as well. I can give you the names of a few YouTubers that I personally
Go
follow
ahead.
if
Go
you're
ahead.
into that. Yeah. Um, my most favorite and absolutely popular on YouTube, her name is Adriene, Yoga with Adriene. She is from Austin, Texas. So she's very close to where we live.
Yep.
Wonderful, wonderful yogi. Another one is Breathe and Flow Yoga. It's a couple. Their name is Breathe and Flow. Very, very famous. They travel the world and teach yoga. And they have series where they tell you when to do what kind of yoga and what is the purpose. So Adrian does yoga for decompressing, de-stressing, yoga for anxiety and things like that. And they really break it down to the T for everyday people and have basic learning series for like 7 or 10 days. And you can follow it one day at a time and go from there. It does not require a lot of investment. Yoga is so easily accessible. You all you need is a towel. If you don't have a yoga mat, use a towel or your floor. If there's a carpet laid in your apartment or your house, there's not a lot of investment, but there's a lot of return on this investment. And that's how you sell yoga to a lot of people. There's so much to gain and then not a lot to lose, other than a lot of the stress and the anxiety. That's where you lose. But there's just so much to gain. And I am so proud that I was able to kind of make that a part of my life and continue to practice it and help a lot of my friends kind of get into that as well. And that would be my message to the people trying to break into yoga and have had those preconceived notions of why they shouldn't. And now I want you to think you totally can.
That is amazing. And I think that's a great point to end on. Ashish Damani. Um, 2 points. We talked a lot about different terms and translations. Ashish, how many languages do you speak? It's your time to flex. How many languages do you
uh, I
speak?
speak 5 languages.
Boom. There we go. If there's any doubt, this man is cultured F. Um, also, this is another thing. This is how this man is so enlightened, I say. Ashish, where can people follow you on social media?
I actually don't use social media,
Boom!
unfortunately.
Look at that. He does not need all the pressures of social media at all. That is amazing. Um, but you guys ever, I'll pass you your contact. Is there any studios that you recommend? Also here in Texas or in, I guess, around the world. I know you're a globetrotter as well. That you are familiar with. That you
There's a few in San Antonio for sure that I can recommend. There's one called the Union, the one that I used to go to back in the day. Very known for their hot yoga practice. Black Swan, a wonderful, wonderful yoga practice off of at the Pearl. There's another one called Yogashala, very, very pure form of yoga. They're also very good teachers at Yogashala. Those three I highly recommend if you're trying to go to a studio and experience some very good yoga.
All right. Well, that was such an enlightening talk. I must say so. I learned so much, and I hope you guys did too. Ladies and gentlemen, Ashish Dhammani, thank you for being on the show. Uh, I wanted to remind our listeners that this podcast is available on all major podcast streaming services such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and all other podcast streaming services, as well as a video version of this will be available on YouTube. You can follow me at Yo Soy No Way, No Way, both on Instagram and Twitter. And if you ever want to discuss any of the topic of this podcast or any previous podcast, you could also catch me live on Twitch on Monday through Fridays, weeknights at the same Yo Soy No Way, No Way. Um, I want to interject real quickly and apologize to After Party, who was my guest last week. I know there were some audio and issues, video issues with their episode. I truly want to apologize. Me and my team are working hard so that doesn't happen again. So I just want to put that out there and apologize publicly to them. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Yoga with Aashish Dhammani. My name is Noe, and this has been Aashish Dhammani's Way. Thank you.